It's September and time to talk about soup. The word soup comes from the French soup or broth, which comes through vulgar Latin supper, which is bread soaked in broth, and from a Germanic source, from which also comes the word sop, a piece of bread used to soak up a soup or a thick stew. Interestingly, the word restaurant was first used in France in the 16th century to refer to a highly concentrated, inexpensive soup sold by street vendors that was advertised as an antidote to physical exhaustion. And we think we have it tough these days. In 1765, a Parisian entrepreneur opened up a shop specializing in such soups. This prompted the use of the modern word restaurant to refer to eating establishments. But soup goes way back, long before then. It's believed that the first bowl of soup was prepared around 20,000 BC. It's assumed that early people began cooking broths as soon as they discovered making mud vessels or clay pots. Some historical documents state that soups had become part of the regular menu in many civilizations from 6000 BC onwards. The word soup is also used in other ways. If you're in trouble in a bad situation, it could be said that stunt landed you in the soup. Many car fans like to soup up their vehicles. And originating from backstreet slang, soup is literally a replacement for the word cool or awesome. This month, as we start spring, you may not think that soup would be high on the list of menu items in our hospitality businesses. But as we all know, September can be a changeable month when it comes to the weather, and we can go from 20 degrees one day to 10 or below the next. So showcasing a dish that could be a lunch, starter or main course makes a lot of sense. And the use of locally grown and in-season produce is also high on the priority list as we continue to navigate an increasing cost of living. So what do? Well, you persuade 18 cafes and restaurants to concoct their own take on a delicious dish, or should that be bowl, of tasty goodness. The Waitaki Super Soup Sipper is the brainchild of Cyndi, the new placemaking lead at the Waitaki District Council, and I caught up with her outside in the sunshine to ask her how the idea came about.
Well, it started with a conversation I had with Jane Thompson from Moa Bakery Cakery, and she knew in the past I had done a hot chocolate challenge in the Lower Hut for the council there, and just wanted to do some version of something where hospitality operators could come together and unite and do something in a kind of a low season. So we batted around a few ideas, kind of eliminating the hot chocolate right away, and came upon soup. It is something that I did a little bit in Lower Hut, just tried to trial it there and see, but it seems more fitting here with the amount of producers and makers and the land and farming is a big component to the district, that it seemed much more plausible to use soup as a way to start telling stories of the businesses and the local produce and all the amazing things that Waitaki has to offer.
One of the cool things about this promotion is that it's not a competition. You're not pitching one place against the other. It's actually just raising the awareness of what's available.
That is correct. Even today I was thinking that, how could we really compete one soup against the other, because they're all so different. And even with, pumpkin soup, which maybe next year, maybe we can do a little separate pumpkin soup competition, because there are 5 different ones in that are featured in the Super Soup Sipper, and that may be the only thing, but it would be really hard to compete one chowder against a pumpkin soup or a French onion soup.
So you're hoping this is going to be an annual event?
Well, we'd like to. It is a pilot this year, and we do want to see, we will go back to the business owners and we'll probably survey, people who have participated through the Facebook page and just see what they liked about it, which worked. Possibly the time of year might not be the right time, since it is definitely getting warmer. But yeah, we would like to see. We think that we've only really touched the tip of the iceberg with what the possibilities are in featuring a bowl of soup and the ingredients in it. And there's just so many opportunities that this thing could grow and get more and more people around the district involved.
There's a wide choice of soups available, from vegan to meat, ale-inspired, and one which came about from a craving. So, ever the sucker, or is that sipper or slurper for a fine soup at lunchtime? I ventured out to a number of the 18 outlets that are taking part in this inaugural and informal showcase to discover a little more. So we're down at Taste Cafe talking to Deb about the tasty pumpkin soup. Had to have taste in the name. What a great idea. And why pumpkin soup? Why did you choose that recipe?
We chose pumpkin soup mainly because pumpkins are readily available at the moment.
How important is cooking with what's available and in season?
In a business, it's incredibly important. It's what keeps your business going. You don't want to be paying stupidly high amounts for vegetables that you could use a locally sourced vegetable instead.
And what makes a good pumpkin soup?
The pumpkin itself. So we source our pumpkins from a local grower's Veggie Joe's. It's grown in the lovely soil that stretches all the way to the sea. And we just enjoy supporting local growers.
So obviously you can't just take a pumpkin and stick it into a pot. What kind of process do you go through and how long does it take to make a batch of soup?
Okay, so we grab the pumpkin, we cut the pumpkin, which is the hardest physical job ever on your hands, and it can take a good 10 minutes or so, and often, unfortunately, my kitchen hands bear the brunt of that.
Do you wind up with orange hands at the end of the shift?
You most certainly do, yeah.
So do you roast it, or what's the secret? What do you add to it to make it so delicious?
So we saute ours, but to roast it and peel it is another option.
Okay, so you're also pairing it up with some delicious ciabatta bread from the Waitaki Bakery. How did that come about?
The chaps from the Waitaki Bakery popped in and gave us some samples, must be well over 2 years ago now, and we've just started using their products ever since. They run a great delivery service 3 days a week, and it's always baked fresh, and we have it by 7 a.m. in the morning.
Very cool. Just talking a wee bit more about the pumpkin soup itself, is it a recipe that has been passed down? Is it something you've created yourself? How did you come about with this particular recipe?
This recipe we've pretty much come about ourselves. It's just standard basic pumpkin soup recipe. We just use some simple Thai curry and we chuck a few parsley stalks in. And we just make sure everything's sautéed up nicely together at the start to give it the flavour.
And you'll find Taste Cafe on Lower Thames Street, just opposite the Waitaki District Council. Moving from a Thai-flavoured pumpkin soup, we head to the Ōamaru Farmers Market, where I caught up with Annie and asked her about the inspiration behind her warming winter soup.
Just a good hearty protein meal, really. You can use just the ordinary tin beans or you can use the raw beans, but you do have to soak them. So that's my preference because that's what makes it nice and rich and creamy.
So what kind of ingredients are we talking about?
Well, we get our hocks, a pickled hock and a raw hock from Campbell's Butchery, and then you just would boil that up and skim off the scum after it's cooked the next day and add all your ingredients and some tinned tomatoes and garlic and spice it up with some nice goodies, and it really is thick and it's just beautiful.
Where did the recipe come from?
Oh, I'm not telling.
Is it a secret?
Well, it's just sort of been concocted. I actually lost the original recipe, so I've had to make a few modifications to the actual recipe, but it's still hearty. It's still a really beautiful soup. And loads of parsley, you've just got all your vitamins and minerals and trace elements, and I think that's one of the things that is lacking today with all the processed food. We really need to start from scratch making our food, and nutrition is so important.
Do you think we take enough time and enough care over what we put in our bodies?
I do, most of the time. We're all guilty of those little sinful pleasures, aren't we? But I've always had a long interest in nutrition. It's probably the best subject I did at school. But I think also when you've grown up on a farm and you know where everything comes from, my parents had a huge vegetable garden, and they would grow carrots all year round and dig a big hole towards in autumn and put a hessian sack down and then dig up all the carrots, lay them on the hessian sack and pull the rest of the sack over the top and cover it up with dirt, and we had carrots all year round. Now kids think they're grown at the supermarket and they come in plastic. And that's what I love about the farmers market. You can take your own bag down and load up, and we really need to be more focused on the environment.
What some people think about too, or possibly forget, I think, is that the supermarket's not necessarily the cheapest place to buy vegetables, and all that money's not going to the growers either.
Exactly right, and that's what's so good about the farmers market. You know, it's a lovely, friendly atmosphere, and you get to chat to people, and you know, you can make new friends down there. And I just think that we need more focus on shopping local.
So if somebody wants to try the warming winter soup, how can they do that?
Well, each Sunday, I think for the next 2 weeks, there will be some warming winter soup down at the farmers market.
So of all the soups that you're making, obviously you made the warming winter soup. What is your personal favourite soup? What is your go-to on a rainy, wet, windy evening and you think, do you know what, I just feel like something to nurture my soul?
I think I do have a recipe in my recipe book that I used to make in my restaurant, and that was a farmhouse soup. And I used to actually call it lentil soup and nobody would order it. So I then decided that I would call it farmhouse soup, and it went flying out the door. So that would be one of my favourites. It's just a meal in itself with loads and loads of vegetables and lovely organic lentils. And yeah, it's a nice creamy one. It's very similar actually to the warming winter soup, except the warming winter soup does have the hock meat in it.
So there you go, 2 delicious recipes to get your teeth into as part of the Waitaki Super Soup Sipper on until the end of September. We'll have more recipes to whet your appetite and tickle your taste buds in the next episode.